Hola, ¿qué tal? Gracias por visitar el canal. Señores, finalmente, Erik acaba de hablar en exclusiva sobre lo que hará contra el régimen de Nicolás Maduro. Además, también habla de la recompensa de los 100 millones de dólares y cómo la administración de Joe Biden no ha hecho nada contra el tirano. Según lo que dice Erik, parece ser que Biden está apoyando de manera discreta al gobierno ilegítimo de Maduro, ya que no ha reconocido, como sí han hecho ya otros países, a Edmundo González. La entrevista está subtitulada. Esperemos que logre despejar todas las dudas en cuanto a cuáles serán los próximos pasos en las próximas semanas sobre la liberación de Venezuela del régimen dictador de Nicolás Maduro.
Everybody, this is Off Leash with Erik. I'm Mark Serrano. It has been 6 weeks since the election in Venezuela, the much maligned election where the opposition demonstrated they beat Maduro by at least 2-1. And yet, what has happened in that time? The U.S. finally imposed sanctions on numerous Maduro allies, but at the same time, a lot of election observers and opposition leaders have been forced into exile. There is a nationwide hunt for dissidents called Knock Knock, where they have now jailed 2,000 people who were involved in that election from the opposition side. A lot has happened. Erik, you have been very, very plugged in with people in Venezuela. They have been very responsive to your reporting through Off Leash on the election. It seems to me like there's a lot more coming up to this story, mostly against the people of Venezuela. But why don't we go through this 6-week period and summarize for us your understanding of what's taken place since Election Day?
Mark, let's go further back than 6 weeks even. Let's go back to when the Biden administration agreed to remove oil sanctions so that in exchange for the Maduro regime was supposed to have a legitimate election. They have done everything they can to block it. The favorite candidate, the one that actually won the primary, Maria Corina Machado, last December, they have blocked and prevented her from even running. So the guy that actually ran against Maduro, Edmundo, he, like you said, he won by 2-1. In the meantime, the Maduro regime is selling a lot of oil, especially through their key ally, Chevron. Yes, the California-based oil company, which seems to turn up at the wrong side of all of these brutal dictatorships. So they've hired plenty of lobbying in Washington to shower Washington with money to really get the Biden administration to do nothing. So they haven't really pushed back at all on Maduro, besides some noise about sanctions. But, it seems the Maduro regime is doing kind of what the Democratic Party goal is, like they've done in California, to make it a one-party state. And I can imagine the frustration. There's been another 1 million Venezuelans have left the country after this, again, a stolen election, coming to America, because Maria Corina Machado's platform was stay put, stay the course, we're going to win this, and reunite your families. And then when it was stolen, 1 million people have already walked out, and I'm sure there's many more. There's been a lot of rightful noise about this Venezuelan gang, Tren de Agua, occupying apartment buildings in Colorado and doing more mayhem because the Maduro regime emptied their prisons and sent them all to America as illegal migrants. So this is important to America on many folds because, A, we don't need more illegal migration, especially of their criminal class. B, the money that the Maduro regime spreads around the rest of Latin America to promote socialism, leftism, communism is horrific, and it's destroying lives, and it's going to drive more and more illegal migration to America as well. And I just don't think the Biden administration is going to lift a finger beyond sanctions, certainly not going to do any covert action or any other pressure tactics to actually make this right.
So let's think about this for a minute, because the way that, and we've discussed this many, many times over the past several months, the way that the Biden administration had lifted sanctions on Maduro and the regime there, and it was a deal. Let's make a deal. You're going to have free and fair elections for us to lift these sanctions. Now we see that Joe Biden basically interfered in their election against the opposition in favor of Maduro. And what does he do? He's now calling out 16 allies of Maduro as if that's going to make much of a damn difference at this point. Why is there not an embargo? Why are we not shutting down any sales of Venezuelan oil, as I know Donald Trump would, or he may, starting after November 5th? I mean, this is interference against the opposition, who clearly won this election.
Yeah, it was not a 52-48. It was 70-30. And we know that because the actual tapes, the receipts of each of the machine were obtained by the opposition and published immediately after the election results, not days later where there was time for fraud, immediately published by the opposition to say, this is what happened. Now, and there's, on top of that, there's another 7 to 8 million people that have left Venezuela, the diaspora, living in Texas, in Florida, in Mexico, in Spain, in Colombia, in Peru. All those people were prevented by Maduro from even voting. So the reality is, if it was a free and fair election, the numbers would have been even more staggering against the socialist Maduro cartel. So yes, we have, there's a real quandary because the gangsters, the Maduro cartel, has stolen 2 other elections before this, and they've gotten away with it. Lots of half measures, lots of noise, lots of diplomatic talk and happy talk, but nothing actually changes because they've never had to face any consequences for actually stealing an election and now oppressing. You said you're right. They've arrested thousands of people, torturing some of them, and threatening. And it is the antithesis of what should be allowed in this hemisphere, but it is.
Yeah, and it's in for a penny, in for a pound. Now Maduro is in a position where he has to apply thuggish tactics. He has to imprison the opposition. He's got to go all in at this point if he wants to stay in power. And yet we've got this feckless, vacancy, a feckless vacant leader in Joe Biden, who set us up for this. I mean, he set up the opposition for this outcome. They've got the receipts, as they say, and yet Maduro is the guy still in power. We've got opposition leaders heading to Spain, such as Edmundo Gonzalez, seeking asylum. I think the wrong person left Venezuela seeking asylum. What can international pressure do at this point? I mean, we should have an embargo. We should have sanctions against them. And yet I see Joe Biden doing very, very little. Kamala Harris wouldn't do any much better. Is there anything South American leaders can do in their position at this point, Erik? I mean, it seems to me like the longer Maduro's in power after this election, the stronger he gets. Am I reading that wrong?
He is definitely weakened right now, but like you said, the opposition has the receipts, but Maduro has the guns. And right after the fraudulent election happened, the Cubans flew in hundreds and hundreds of security advisors on commercial aircraft into Venezuela to bolster the security. They do provide the inner security phalanx around Maduro and his regime. So until the regime feels some consequences, they're going to stay put. And I am sure they're not going to go anywhere until they see the results of the U.S. election. And we'll see what the appetite is for the next team to do the right thing. And but stay tuned. There's some work afoot to raise some money for the opposition to get more organized, because it has to transition from a political opposition to a physical opposition to an illegitimate government that is ruining Venezuela and taking it down a very dangerous path.
Well, so as much as the opposition is at a great disadvantage physically, they actually have something that they didn't today that they didn't have 6 weeks ago, and that's moral authority. That they are able to prove, yes, he lost the election, and now he's just an out dictator. I don't know, how much value moral authority has in a situation like this. It certainly is a different dynamic in the country. I mean, things have changed dramatically in 6 weeks' time. They have the moral authority, but boy, that's got to be a tough position to be in. The opposition, you've got their leadership is feeling the need to leave the country. I'm sure they're doing that to try to continue to organize from afar. But then you've got imprisonment taking place, 2,000 dissidents who are being imprisoned. It just seems to be a really dire situation. And I think the help is going to have to come from the outside, at least with financial support, because moral authority is only going to take you so far, right?
When I trolled Maduro and Cabello, the interior minister now, when I said on a tweet that if Biden and Harris wanted to do the right thing for Venezuela, they should up the bounties, because already Maduro is wanted. There's a wanted poster, an indictment against him for $15 million by the DEA for drug trafficking. And I said, if you raise the bounties to $100 million each, using the frozen government money funds, sit back and watch the magic happen. Because I think even people in the inner circle would sell him out and take him to be arrested. They haven't chosen to do that. They're not making any moves. But it definitely it evoked an enormous response from the diaspora saying, please set up a GoFundMe site. And so there's a lot of things like that in the works. So stay tuned on Venezuela, because the last chapter is not yet written.
Well, look, we've got 5 months left in the Biden administration. That's a long 5 months for this opposition. Clearly, U.S. policy needs a dramatic shift for people to be able to realize freedom in Venezuela again. But we are so out of sync. And you take a look, Erik, too, those numbers you gave us about 1 million people leaving Venezuela, where else are they going to go but the United States of America? And now we've got Venezuelan gangs in various cities in the United States, in Colorado and elsewhere, who are literally taking over apartment buildings, taking over city blocks. I mean, this is the ripple effect of Joe Biden's policies, just like we have seen with how he emboldened Iran to attack Israel through their proxies. We're also seeing the ripple effect in a policy like this, where Maduro was able to sell oil, enrich himself, build out his military, steal the election, and then people are forced out of there, including gang members that he let out of prison, who are now damaging and ruining American cities. I mean, is this not a perfect case study about policy gone wrong and how it affects American citizens in our own streets?
Like I said before, the Cubans have moved in additional forces, and now also the Iranians are providing assistance to the Maduro government to suppress and oppress their citizens in our hemisphere. The Monroe Doctrine is dead if this is allowed to occur. Again, leadership has consequences. The lack of leadership has consequences. And I'm sure the Venezuelan people are hoping that Donald J. Trump is elected on November 5.
Yeah, we need massive sanctions. We need a total shift in policy. We need support, financial support, to be supplied to the opposition. This is a disaster, a debacle.
Mark, I disagree. I disagree. Enough sanctions. Covert action.
That's a great point. I stand corrected. Sanctions aren't going to matter at this point, but our oil policy has got to change.
Yeah, the fact that Chevron is still pumping millions of dollars worth of oil per day, paying lobbyists in the United States to assist in the oppression of citizens in the Western Hemisphere, unacceptable. Bad on you, Chevron. Bad on you, Chevron board members.
So let's exit on this, Erik. We've been at this for a while and off leash. Clearly your words deliver a lot of impact on issues such as Venezuela. Tell us a little bit about what you've heard from people who have appreciated, your calls to up the bounty and our prior discussions about Venezuela. What are you hearing from the grassroots, and how meaningful it is that we're having these conversations?
Well, I'm really kind of shocked because no other American has actually spoken on behalf of the Venezuelan people, and I've paid attention to this, and I'm particularly sensitive to the fact that you can vote in socialism, but you have to shoot your way out. And this is a perfect example, and how dangerous the siren song of socialism and Chavismo was, and how it is oppressing all the people in that country now, and how unacceptable it is.
Yeah, and we see dramatic contrasts in the region, in South America, in El Salvador, in Argentina, dramatic contrasts about what's possible when you shrink government, when you bring freedom in, when you change the economy, when you get control of these gangs, just like Bukele has done in El Salvador. What a dramatic contrast about what freedom can mean with economic prosperity and peace in these countries, right?
Freedom and rule of law versus gangsterism. It's a very, very clear contrast. Look at Cuba. Cuba continues to bleed people because they can't even buy basic commodities there. I talked to Cuban cab drivers down in Miami who send sugar by mail to their families still in Cuba because that's how much of a disaster their economy is.
Look, this is a really important topic. Things are very hot in Venezuela. Maduro is hanging on strongly with the help of Iran and Cuba. There's going to be a lot more to report on this in the coming weeks and months. The opposition needs help. People need freedom in Venezuela. And by the way, it has a direct impact on U.S. interests. Last word to you, Erik.
The last chapter is not written on the Maduro regime, but it's coming.